world is prepared for the next pandemic? What have you learned?
Well, we've learned a lot of things. I think the world can still come together on ensuring long-term capacity. And this is what I've always said, that, okay, this pandemic may be hopefully over in 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years. But then what are we doing about keeping and stockpiling empty capacity? And this is what we have offered to certain regions and other countries.
What does that mean, stockpiling empty capacity?
So what I mean is entering into a long-term contract for 10 or 15 years with a certain region or a country which doesn't have the ability to manufacture vaccines, giving them the priority and, at a fixed price. So, for example, imagine that you can have a 15-year idle capacity for a small reservation fee to a manufacturer who could supply an entire region on priority with the push of a button, with multiple different technologies and products that could be put in there. So, for example, in 5 years' time, there's another pandemic. Somebody innovates and makes a messenger RNA or a viral vector vaccine. Where are you going to produce it? Again, to find partners, to find capacity, then you do a tie-up, you negotiate on pricing, all of that. So instead of that, why not have that inbuilt for 15 years as a long-term contract where a lot of countries are willing to do that? I mean, today, for example, where does a country spend, in my opinion, or anyone else's opinion, their national budget? Do they spend it buying fighter jets, arms, space programs, or do they now invest in empty capacity for the long term, which they can, with the push of a button, secure their nation against any pandemic? So this is what I'm proposing, that this is where the world community needs to come together and have 4 or 5 of these massive centers of manufacturing, probably in the countries which are already doing it, to be able to service the world going forward. And I think that would be one way of addressing the future pandemics. And again, the global harmonization for regulatory, so that a manufacturer does not have to go to multiple different countries and regulators to have a vaccine that adheres to a quality standard that everyone is willing to accept. So what I would urge the regulators to do is come to a certain quality standard, which makes life a lot easier and faster for manufacturers to then just apply and adhere to that. That would also address vaccine certificates. It would address CGMP manufacturing. It would address the clinical standards as well. So there would be one clinical standard, so you don't have different people doing different kinds of trials. And then, all this criticism and politics, oh, you should have done this, you should have done that. So these are the things that I've learned from this pandemic that I would propose to the world leaders and the world regulators to come together to be better prepared for the future pandemic, so that we can act faster with none of this stuff that we've experienced in the last 1 year.
How do we do that? Who's going to organize that? The WHO has been an amazing organization. It is well known to be under-resourced. Who is going to coordinate that?
Well, you've got world leaders, you've got G7, you've got G20, you've got WHO and the UN. I'm sure between these great people and leaders and countries, they can come to some conclusion and understanding, because to be honest, this would be the most impactful as far as, being prepared for future pandemics. These 2 or 3 or 4 measures that if they can agree upon, and I know it's not easy, it's not going to be easy, but you asked me a question, how do we prepare for the future pandemics? This is how you have to do it. I can't do it as a manufacturer. The industry can't do it. It'll have to be in collaboration by these countries, by the UN, the WHO, and probably these major countries that have manufacturing and the most regulation, or the main, as I said, those 4 or 5 regions which regulate the world as far as quality standards are concerned.